What are your conditions? Letitia squinted at him. First, I shall be paid 50 billion. Dustin raised a finger. 50 billion? That's outrageous. Brittany was angered. Then I guess we do not have a deal. Dustin left them no room to negotiate. All right. 50 billion it is. Letitia nodded. Money was not important. As long as Madam Edith was alive, they could always make more. The Jade Maiden Sisterhood lacked no rich men fawning over them. Second, Nikki Horst returns to the Jade Maiden Sisterhood. Dustin raised another finger. That wouldn't be a problem. Letitia agreed readily. That wasn't a big deal for her. Third, get rid of this wench from the sisterhood and never take her in again. Dustin pointed at Brittany. What? The crowd was in an uproar at Dustin's words. None of them had expected such a condition from him. Brittany was the lead disciple of the sisterhood. She was meant to be Madam Edith's successor. If she was driven out, who would be the one to take her place? You've gone overboard. After she got over the initial shock, Brittany fumed. You horrid man! How dare you drive a wedge between us? I'll slice you up. Dustin didn't respond to her. His gaze was fixed on Letitia. These are my conditions. If you agree to all three, I'll help Madam Parker. There were two reasons why he requested for Brittany to be kicked out. First, because he hated her, and second, in consideration of Nikki. With Brittany still in the sisterhood, Nikki would have a tough time ahead. I can agree to the first two conditions, young man. But your third request is a little too much. Letitia frowned. Brittany was Edith's favorite disciple. How could they just kick Brittany out like that? If that's asking for too much, why don't you go back and consider a bit more? Come back. Again when you've decided. Of course, we never know how much longer Madam Parker can live. With that said, Dustin turned around and walked back in. Just a second. Letitia's expression changed. I agree to your conditions. She shouted. Have you gone mad, Madam Letitia? Brittany leapt up when she heard what Letitia said. The bastard wants you to drive me out of the sisterhood. And you're going to do as he says. Edith's life is at stake. As her lead disciple, should you not be a good example to the rest? This is a test of your loyalty. Letitia said, but, no buts. Brittany wanted to say more but was cut off by Letitia. I will do anything to keep Edith alive. Even if the price I have to pay is to break my limbs, I will do it. Having you kicked out is the least of my concerns. Brittany paled. She looked like she had just been struck by lightning. She honestly never thought that this was what things would come to. How could she, the favorite disciple, become the sacrificial lamb? Dustin, this isn't too nice, is it? Nikki's brows furrowed slightly. She couldn't bear to see Brittany being kicked out. What's not nice about it? I'm doing this for you. You should know she didn't bat an eyelash when she accused and whipped you last night. Are you going to stand up for her? Dustin asked coldly. Nid was left speechless. Dustin turned to look at her and said, an advice to you, never play the saint. Nothing good will ever come of it. What are you doing still standing there? Get lost. Letitia shouted at her impatiently. Brittany seemed to wake up from a trance. She glared at Dustin as she pointed a finger at him. You wretched bastards. Curse you. Throw her out. Letitia didn't want to deal with her anymore. The Jade Maiden Sisterhood disciples dragged Brittany away on Letitia's orders. If she stayed longer, she might anger Dustin with her nasty words. That would be terrible for them. I've driven her out of the sisterhood now. Young man, will you save Edith now? Letitia asked after getting rid of Brittany. Pay up first, Dustin reminded. Sure, Letitia dared not wait any longer. She immediately transferred all the money she had to Dustin. Once the transaction was completed, Dustin nodded reluctantly. Under his orders, his men brought the unconscious Edith into the infirmary. After renovating Zephyr Lodge, it now had all sorts of facilities. From infirmaries to sparring halls and libraries, they had it all. To not be disrupted, Dustin only brought Nikki into the infirmary. The rest of the disciples were locked out. Time passed in the blink of an eye. Very soon, it was already noon. Letitia and the rest of the disciples waited outside the infirmary anxiously. Some of them paced around, looking tense. They've already been in there for so long. Why aren't we hearing anything from them yet? Could anything have happened to Madam Edith? Hey, watch your mouth. Madam Edith will pull through. She's going to be all right. I'm just worried. Can that rascal treat Madam Edith's injuries? What if he's just a scammer? We'll suffer a great loss then. Every one of them fell silent. Soon, the infirmary door opened. Dustin walked out slowly, wiping his hands. How did it go? Is Edith fine now? Letitia asked worriedly. The rest of them waited for an answer with bated breaths. She's awake now. She should be fine after a few days' rest, Dustin told them. That's great. They all shared looks of delight and rushed in to check on Edith. As expected, they found her awake. Though a little pale, she appeared to be fine. Madam Edith. They all called out to her and pushed at each other to glimpse Edith. They began to ask her how she was feeling and if she was fine, being thoughtful and caring for her. Thank you. Dustin, Nikki looked at him with appreciation as she walked out of the infirmary. She had seen the entire process of how he had treated Edith, and it was amazing. His acupuncture skills were exceptional. Though Nikki knew little about it, she could tell he was skilled. Who would have known that? Dustin would have such brilliant medical skills at such a young age. She had truly underestimated him. You're welcome. Take good care of Madam Parker. I hope she remembers the kindness you've shown her. Dustin flashed her a gentle smile before turning to leave. He had spent a lot of true energy treating Edith. That caused the septum mortis within him to work up even faster. So he had to return to his room to rest. That afternoon, as Dustin was meditating, his phone suddenly rang. It was Florence. The moment he answered the call, a loud voice began shouting at him through the phone. Reese, you beast. What on earth have you done? Dahlia attempted suicide because of you. What? Suicide? Dustin jumped to his feet when he heard what Florence said. How did that happen? You beast. How dare you ask me how that happened? It's all because of you, of course. Florence shouted. After she met you the other night, Dahlia seemed to have lost her soul. She refused to eat or drink, and she cried endless nights. Then, this morning, she attempted suicide by jumping off the building. Dustin felt like he'd been struck by lightning. His mind went completely blank. Never in his wildest dreams had he ever thought that Dahlia would act so rashly. How could she attempt suicide by jumping off a building without saying anything to anyone at all? Had she lost her mind? How is she now? There was a tremble in Dustin's voice. She's still in a critical condition and doing horribly. Her life is in danger. And this is all because of you. You beast. You're the reason Dahlia threw herself off the building. I'm warning you, Reese. If anything happens to Dahlia, I'll make you pay with your life. Florence swiftly ended the call after spewing threats at him. Dustin sat there idly with his phone in his hand. When he finally snapped out of it, he dashed out the door instantly. He got into his car and sped to the hospital within 30 minutes. He quickly found Dahlia's ward after asking around for a bit. When he entered the room, he saw Dahlia lying unconscious on the bed. She was wrapped up in bandages and was unusually pale. She looked very weak. Florence and several others stood by her bedside, looking helpless. How dare you show your face here, Reese? At the sight of Dustin, Florence's anger flared again. Look at her. Look what a state you've gotten Dahlia into. You heartless bastard. How did she fall for a scumbag like you? After screaming at him, she began punching and kicking at him to let out her anger. Dustin Reese, I've always thought that you were an honest man. Who would have thought that you were such a jerk? Julie began berating him, too. Dahlia didn't hold onto your past mistakes and went out of her way to defend you. But you had the heart to hurt her so much that you drove her to despair. You even hurt her to the point that she would attempt suicide. You truly are a scumbag.